UFC Vegas 95. We return to the Apex.
Back at the Apex.
5-fight main card. We got a rematch in the main event. Tybura Spivac. But before we get to that, Alex, let's run through this 5-fight main card very quickly. Not very quickly, but let's...
I'm trying to walk, homie, and let's walk right through it. Alan Pero Oso Nascimento, 20-6 in his career, is taking on Jafel Filho. He's 16-3 in his career. He is trying to preach this weekend.
Brazil versus Brazil violence here. We got the 20-6 Nascimento, 2-1 in the UFC with 1 submission win, taking on the 16-3, 2-1 in the UFC Pastor, also 2-1 in the UFC. Both guys 1 submission win. So it seems like a pretty even matchup in a matchup of 2 guys that have very similar styles.
Yes. Nascimento leans heavily for submissions, like Filho does. Similar story with Filho, 2-1 in the UFC as well. They both lost their debut and won 2 back to back. Except Filho lost to, rising, or I guess a former rising star in the UFC, Muhammad Mokaev. He lost to sub, where Nascimento lost by decision. Outside of all that,
Nascimento not the most active fighter either. His last fight was in January of 23. So he doesn't. I think he fought once in 2022 and then twice in 21. So hasn't been fighting a lot lately.
Filho, while both kind of hunt submissions, Filho has recent KOs, so kind of leads me to believe that he's not been leaning on the hands, but maybe he has a little bit more polished striking.
I agree with that, but both guys still, I think, if they have it their way, they're going to want to choke you out.
Absolutely.
15 out of the 20 wins for Nascimento by submission. 10 out of the 16 wins for Filho by submission. As we said, both guys have 1 submission win in the UFC.
Right.
Alex, how do you see this fight going?
So this one's going to be interesting because Alan Nascimento, it just crashed on me, of course, but he gets taken down as much as he takes down. His takedown defense, I guess he maybe because he prefers to be taken down. But
yeah, I think
we know that just doesn't work out for people if the other side can wrestle. And we know
he's comfortable being on his back though, and getting taken down.
He's comfortable taken down by his back. I heard that. Got it. Filho, similar story. He gets taken down. He takes people down. This is going to be one that I think is going to end up going to the decision, where the slight underdog Jafel Filho is going to win due to the similar style. It's like if we're thinking the same way, we're doing the same thing. It's probably not going to pay off that well for both of us unless one of them gets a game plan change and it's like, hey, let's switch on this game plan B instead.
I agree with you in none of that.
Okay.
I think Nascimento gets the win. I think Nascimento...
I didn't expect that at all.
Very strong on the ground, and while Filho is also strong on the ground, he's shown he can get subbed. Nascimento is a guy that's not been subbed before, and I think he takes the advantage to that. I think, he might get taken down, but he has trickier submissions, better submission defense. So I got Nascimento winning the fight, and I think he gets a submission to win the fight.
Okay. Well, we'll see how that works. Let's go to the next fight. Yana Santos. Taking on Chelsea Chandler, the Stockton Slammer.
Yana is 14-8 with 1 no contest, 4-5 in the UFC with 3 KO losses.
In a row. Just 3 losses in a row.
3 losses in a row, 3 KO losses overall. And she's taking on Chelsea Chandler, as you said, from Stockton, California. 6-2 overall, 2-1 in the UFC. She did win her last fight. A unanimous decision over Nunes.
Yep. And we're not going to talk about that Norma Dumont fight
anymore. We're not going to talk about that. Both girls actually fought Norma Dumont, if I'm not mistaken. Both lost Norma Dumont.
Just similar, just different ways of losing. One had a decent... Never mind. We're not going to talk about Norma Dumont anymore.
Both prefer to have a stand-up fight. While both can go to the ground and do a little ground and pound, maybe a couple submissions, I think both girls... If they had their way, they're both going to be standing. They're both going to be on the front foot going after each other.
Yep.
How do you see this fight going, Alex?
I think this one, we've seen it before, right? We've seen people on their careers going kind of downhill, 3 losses in a row. And we've seen, up-and-comers like Chelsea Chandler who have to fight tests, to make big strides to rise the ranks quickly. She's only fought 8 times, Chelsea Chandler, so she doesn't have a lot of experience. So they're giving her somebody who's on the downswing. You know, we don't know. We've seen Yana Santos in previous fights in her career be very strong, very up there in the division.
But as you said, not in the last 3. Her last win was in 21.
Last one was in 21. So that kind of positions them at a crossroads, right? Is this the time for Santos to, you know, step back up and, you know, teach Chelsea Chandler that this is not the time? Or does Chelsea Chandler rise to the occasion? I think Chelsea Chandler rises to the occasion. I think after the Norma Dumont fight, she had a good long camp before her next fight, and she came out way better. She won by decision. She's won both of her UFC fights as the underdog. She's the underdog here. She's 2-1 as the underdog in the UFC. She's never been a favorite. So I think that's going to be her thing throughout her career, at least early on. And she's going to be the underdog a lot. She's going to be, you know, having to fight the person who has, you know, better odds to win. And I think Chelsea Chandler is going to have to continue to rise to the occasion and win time and time again. I mean, I know that's the game plan every day, but I think that's the way the Stockton Slammer is going to have to be.
I actually agree with you on this one. I'm picking Chelsea Chandler. I think
by decision.
I think it's going to be a decision win for her. I think she gets her 2nd straight win. I think Yana Santos gets her 4th straight loss. Fun fact about Yana Santos, you know who her husband is?
Santos. What's
Thiago
his name?
Santos.
Yeah, Thiago Santos. There you go.
R.I.P. to his 2 ACLs against John Jones that one time.
Yeah, that doesn't feel great, I guarantee it.
Let's move on to the next fight. We got Chipe the Machine Gun Mariscal versus Damon the Leech Jackson. Chipe comes in 16 wins, 6 losses, 1 no contest with a perfect 3-0 record in the UFC. Damon Jackson, 23 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw, 1 no contest, 6-4, 1-1 in the UFC. So that's 50% wins.
That's a lot of numbers.
He has 3 finishes. He's also been finished 3 times. He's coming off of a split decision win. Chipe, 6 fights in a row. He's obviously 3-0 in the UFC, so at least 3 fights in a row. I think this is going to be a good fight. Mariscal was actually supposed to fight Dan Ige before Dan Ige fought on 4 hours' notice.
Yep.
This was supposed to be the fight he was preparing for.
And Damon Jackson's lost to Dan Ige.
Damon Jackson has lost to Dan Ige. He, as I said, he did come. He won a split decision in his last fight. Before that, 2 straight losses. So he's trying to build a little momentum. What do you think about this fight?
So, like Damon Jackson's hairline, I don't think he's back. This one,
You think he's receding?
I think. Well, no, he bought a new hairline. His hairline was receding. His hairline is back. He's not.
So unlike Damon Jackson's hairline.
There you go. There you go. Chepe Mariscal, 3-0 in the UFC. He's the shorter fighter, but he's out there for blood every time. He's 5'11". Damon Jackson's, or I'm sorry, Chepe Mariscal's 5'7". Damon Jackson is 5'11". He has the edge on the reach, and I don't think that the age really is going to matter on this one. It really only matters once it's, you know, out of their prime and like really in their prime is the comparison we see a lot. It's close though. I think Chepe Mariscal is probably going to win by knockout this one out. The Leech is, you know, he has the Leech nickname for a reason, but he hasn't been leaning on that recently. You know, he's been going with the hands a lot more. I think that kind of confidence is going to play him foul this time.
Yeah, because he has been known to catch a KO or two.
Right.
Getting KO'd, that is.
And I think we're going to see a Chepe Mariscal get in close and do some heavy damage with a 2nd round KO over Damon Jackson.
I agree with you on this one. Chepe Mariscal, I love watching him fight. He's one of those guys, like, you can see him and you're like, I would not fuck with this dude.
Yeah, right. If I saw him in a mall having an argument, I would not interfere.
He's a scary dude, and I think he continues his scariness this weekend. I agree with you. I think he gets a knockout against Damon Jackson, so I got Chepe as well.
All right, so for the next fight, we're going to talk about the co-main, but more importantly, an aggravating fighter versus a well-rounded fighter, in my opinion. The aggravating one being Cruz Gutierrez because his leg kicks are so painful, so hurting to his opponents, and Javed Basharat, who...
The snow leopard from Afghanistan.
From Afghanistan, which I guess they
have mountains.
Okay, I was in the mountains. That would make sense. He's well-rounded. You know, he's got knockouts. He's got submissions. He's taking people down.
But he doesn't have any in the UFC.
You're
5
right.
UFC fights. He has 3 wins, 1 loss. One no contest. He hasn't won in his last 2 fights either after a 3-0 start.
Right.
Obviously,
Wow.
one of those no contests, but he lost his last fight.
My initial thing for talking shit on Gutierrez was going to be to say that he only had 3 finishes in his 9 UFC fights, and then I got to Basharat where I couldn't really use that as a shit talking point, but just to say that Gutierrez, the leg kicks over and over again, every fight, those are going to be a problem. But the one thing I have to say, if you know it's going to be a problem, you can use your whole camp to game plan for it. I know taking away the leg kicks are going to be important for Basharat because that's going to be the way he wins the fight. Being able to walk by the end of it is the path to victory.
I agree with you, but if that's in your head too, that I think it leaves you open to some other attacks.
Maybe.
From Mr. Gutierrez.
Maybe, and that's literally what we're here to find out.
We're going to find out, yes.
So Basharat, like I said, well-rounded, no finishes in the UFC, but he gets people on the ground. He does damage. Good striker, good ground game. Who do you think is going to win?
I think it's going to be a lot closer than the odds suggest. I think.
Yeah, it's like plus 230.
I was surprised to see that. I thought this would be more of a pick 'em, and I'm actually going with the underdog, Chris Gutierrez. I think he has more experience in the UFC. As you said, those leg kicks are nasty. Basharat, I think, losing his last fight, how is he going to respond off of his first career loss, not only his first UFC loss.
Right.
He's 14-1. So I got Chris Gutierrez. I got the veteran winning. He's fighting a 28-year-old who doesn't have as many fights in the UFC, doesn't have as many fights total, and he's coming off of his first loss. So I think he's trying to figure things out. I think Gutierrez, although he's lost in the UFC, we've seen him lose, including his last fight against Song Yadong. He knows who he is.
Song Yadong.
So I got Chris Gutierrez with the win. A tough vet.
Yeah.
That was one of the bullet points I had for him.
I do like Chris Gutierrez. He's a tough fighter for sure. I do think the odds are kind of wonky. But I have to lean with Javid Basharat. I think he's going to weather the storm. I think he's going to perform where he needs to perform. While he hasn't won in 2 fights, he is 3-1-1 as a favorite in the UFC. He's been a favorite every time. But, he's won.
He's also 0-1 as a favorite in his last fight.
Yeah, sure. That's fine. I have Javid Basharat winning the fight. So one we disagree upon. Cool. Let's go to the co-main. Big boys. One I'm sure is not going to see
Big boy rematch.
the full timer.
I don't know. The last time they fought, they went all the way to the distance.
Marcin Tybura versus Serghei Spivac 2.
The 38-year-old Pole in Tybura, the 29-year-old Polar Bear in Spivac from Moldova. Tybura 25-8 overall, 12-7 in the UFC.
That was funny. I like that.
Spivac 16 wins, 4 losses overall, 7-4 in the UFC. So both guys, they're used to getting UFC wins. They're also used to getting knocked out in the UFC.
By Tom Aspinall specifically.
Yeah, both knocked out by Aspinall in the first round, as everybody is. Yeah. Tybura's lost 4 times in the UFC by KO. Mm-hmm. Spivac not much better, 3 losses by KO in the UFC.
Right.
And let's just say in their first matchup, it was, in 2020?
Yep.
It was a unanimous decision win by Tybura.
Yep.
How much does this play into it? We don't know.
I think, honestly, the big age difference. Serghei Spivac 4 years ago was 25 years old.
Yeah, which is crazy for a heavyweight.
He was a baby heavyweight fighting.
And he's
a
still
grown 35-year-old man.
He's still considered a baby heavyweight. 29 years old is nothing for a heavyweight, and now fighting a 38-year-old man.
I think this one's a pretty much pick 'em on the cards.
Which I think is fair.
Plus 125, minus 150 in the heavyweight division with similar reach, similar size. They're both orthodox fighters. They're down to stand and bang, but they can wrestle.
Both guys, 2 of the most well-rounded heavyweights.
Yeah, 9 KOs, 7 KOs, and both have 7 subs. It's going to be a big test, but I think the growth from Spivac is what I'm focusing on here. He lost the first time out. Tybura hasn't done a whole lot different since they fought. He hasn't changed a bunch with his game plan.
He was 35 years old. He's the same guy.
He's the same guy.
Spivac's evolving.
Spivac is better than he was, and I would say a lot better. He, granted, both got knocked out by Aspinall, but that's an anomaly.
And Spivac's coming off of a knockout to Serial
gone. Yeah.
Serial gone.
Serial gone.
All the cereal's gone.
Yeah. That, for me, Spivac's growth, I lean that Spivac's going to get the KO win here. I think he's going to catch him. I think he's going to lean more on the hands and, try to get this fight done early.
I'm going to agree with you. I think There's going to be two major differences between this and the first fight. It's going to be a different winner, and that Spivac's going to win. And it's not going to go the distance. It's going to be finished early. Spivac by KO.
Yeah, I would love to see a big Spivac KO this weekend. That would be great.